Good evening and welcome to Channel Islands National Park and Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary Shore to Sea Lecture Series. The lecture series is sponsored jointly with generous support from the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum. The lectures are held on the second consecutive Tuesday and Wednesday of each month. The Tuesday lectures are at the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum, and the Wednesday lectures are held here at Channel Islands National Park Visitor Center Auditorium. The lectures are taped by VCAPCD, and they're available to Ventura channel's viewers on Channel 15 throughout the month after each lecture is presented. Check website for program scheduling at www.capstv.org. The upcoming lectures in the series in February will have Dr. Milton Love presenting on pelagic water column fishes, and that's going to be February 10th and 11th. In March, we'll have Ann Solomon presenting on evaluating food web dynamics as indicators of ecosystem health. This evening, we're extremely proud to present Air, the Search for One Clean Breath, filmed by the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District. This evening, we have with us the director of the Air Pollution Control District, Mike Villegas.
I think tonight the viewers are going to get a chance to enjoy a film that's quite unique, and I really hope that you take this to heart, because we put a lot of work into it, and to date, the screenings have gotten very good reviews, so I think you're going to enjoy it.
And I would also agree that this is an issue which is very pertinent to all of us, that the air is something which affects not only the members of Ventura County, but all of the United States. And I think that your film does a very nice job of capturing the global aspect of this problem that we're facing.
Yeah, one of the things when we first looked at creating this outreach tool, as we looked at ourselves and said, well, how are we going to reach a wide audience on air quality with our limited resources? And our staff was aware of a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency grant that allowed us to actually produce this film once we were awarded that grant. One of the things the U.S. EPA wanted was a product, a film, if you will, that was national in scope. So the film doesn't per se focus on Ventura County, and I believe that that's appropriate from the standpoint that really air quality doesn't know any political boundaries. And what we tried to do with this film was to create a character in air that people could relate to, much like the natural resource. It's easy to relate to water or wildlife, but we wanted people to relate to air as a natural resource. And I think the film also really drives home the importance of air quality related to public health and the public health impacts.
What are your agency's distribution plans for the film? How are you planning on spreading this good work that you've done?
Well, initially, under our grant, we had to provide it to every clean air agency in the United States, and there are approximately 220 agencies, and we have accomplished that. It's been screened. The preview screening for the U.S. EPA was in Portland, Oregon, and we've also screened at some major air quality conferences in Long Beach. About 1,500 high school students previewed it there in addition to the conference attendees.
Well, speaking of the schools, I do know that the school audience is one that you plan on reaching out to. What are your plans for getting your film into schools and into teachers' hands?
Well, right now we're working with an organization that actually creates curriculum, especially environmental curriculum. And in California, one of the things that's, in the past you could just put out curriculum and teacher may use it or not, but with the new state standards for the achievement tests, you really have to speak those specific criteria in those state standards. And right now we're working with an organization to best fit the film with the California academic standards. And once we do that, and it might work out that it's grade 8, it might work out that it's grade 10, then we're going to disperse it to all the appropriate grades, the schools in the county. The other thing I wanted to point out as part of distribution is that we are, locally our first screening was in Ojai, and as you're aware, we just recently screened it at the Channel Islands National Park Visitor Center. We've got a screening next month at the Oxnard Library during Earth Day week, City of Thousand Oaks Library, and if anyone's interested in having a screening at an organization or their company, you can go to the website. It's www.airthefilm.org. No spaces, just airthefilm.org. Or contact our public information officer, Barbara Page, at 645-14 Once again, that's 645-1415.
Okay. Well, Michael, your agency has oversight over a number of the air quality issues in this county. What are some of the air quality issues that Ventura County faces?
Well, the main issue we face in Ventura County is what people commonly refer to as smog, but it's really ozone. And ozone is just an unstable form of oxygen. Instead of 2 oxygen atoms, it's actually 3. It's O3. And it's an oxidant. And when you think of a common oxidant, that would be household bleach. Mm-hmm. And when you know what that does to materials, and it certainly would do to your lung tissue, well, ozone does the same thing. And if it's unhealthy for your lung tissue, it's certainly not good for plants or animals, etc. So in addition to a public health issue, certainly in Ventura County, with agricultural, the secondary impact on agricultural yields is
mm-hmm.
important.
You speak of agriculture. What are some of the industries that you oversee or who are more heavily regulated because of their impact on the air?
Well, air pollution control districts in California, we regulate what we refer to as stationary sources. So that would be everything from our 2 power plants, large industrial operations, the offshore oil and gas platforms, and then landfills, and then everything down to the corner gas station, print shops, and dry cleaners. We do not regulate cars, light trucks, buses, locomotive, aircraft, or ships. Those fall under the state and federal government.
Okay. What are some of the air quality issues that you see in Ventura County's future?
Well, looking forward, it looks like good news. When you look back, there's been dramatic improvements in air quality in Ventura County. In 2003, we actually achieved the old 120 part per billion smog standard 2 years ahead of the mandated deadline of 2005. We're now working towards attaining an 84 part per billion ozone standard. And if you look back in the 1980s, we were probably violating that standard 100 days a year. Mm-hmm. In the 1990s, 50, 60 days a year. Now we're looking under 10 days a year. So you're seeing dramatic improvements. We believe we're on schedule to meet that attainment deadline by 2012. But you can see that things are getting better in this county, and it's due to the work, the controls we have on power plants. For example, a lot of people think a coal-fired power plant. That's just something that doesn't occur in California. These are natural gas-fired plants. They have catalysts very similar to the catalysts that would be on your automobile, and that's mandated by our regulations. And like I said, everything down to the corner gas station, you've seen the vapor recovery boots. Those are mandated by district regulations. The architectural coating, when you paint your living room in your home, you're using a coating that has very low solvent and that releases very few smog-forming emissions.
These unhealthy days that you spoke of, are these the same days that we hear about sometimes on the news when they're talking about the weather and they talk about it being unhealthy to be outside?
Those are in general. And in Ventura County, our smog season is really May through October. Mm-hmm. And it's really the inland valleys that encounter these unhealthy days, specifically Ojai and Simi. When you look at our monitors on the West County, the coastal plain certainly does not see exceedances of the smog standard. So basically, you really aren't seeing those smoggy days in the Ventura, Oxnard, Camarillo area.
Which we certainly, I think, all appreciate. Do you think the district will be involved in climate change programs?
Certainly. When you think about how carbon dioxide is really a result of fuel combustion, and we regulate the power plants, the offshore platforms, large industrial facilities that have turbines, and landfills, certainly a source of methane. Mm-hmm. It would make sense that we would also apply those greenhouse gas regulations via our permit program to those. And an interesting new program that has just started up is the refrigerants used in large building air conditioning and, let's say, a grocery store's refrigeration system are maybe 1,000 times more potent global warming gases than carbon dioxide, the one we're always talking about. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be working with the state to regulate those facilities in the future.
Good. How do the levels of CO2 and climate change relate, or do they?
Well, they actually do. And the Earth is surrounded by an atmosphere, and part of that atmosphere is carbon dioxide. And what happens is really the sun and the sun's energy drive the Earth's climate. And solar radiation reaches the Earth, warming the Earth's surface. And some of that infrared radiation is radiated back into space. Well, these greenhouse gases, such as CO2, actually catch some of that radiation and re-radiate it back towards Earth, which is an additional warming for the Earth's surface. And without these greenhouse gases, at their natural levels, Earth would be approximately 60 degrees Fahrenheit colder than it is today. So life as we know it would not exist without them. So
that's substantial.
That is. That's quite a change. And the thing what they're seeing is in the 1900s, it is a steady increase in carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. And they believe it's very likely that it's the result of humans' use of fossil fuels, everything from our power plants to our cars to our water heaters, etc. And I use the term very likely, and that's a term used by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and what it denotes is a confidence level of 90 to 99% that hypothesis that this additional climate change is attributable to human actions.
Okay. Using current technology, how much cleaner do you think that we can, or how much more can we accomplish in cleaning our air?
Actually, I think significant. When you look at the stationary source side, I think we've utilized current technology to the extent feasible, and there's been dramatic reductions. As I said, you drop from 100 days over the standard in the 80s to less than 10 days nowadays. Well, we're having population increase. You can see that a lot's been done. Cars are much cleaner. The area we're going to see this current technology make additional benefits is in areas such as diesel engines, heavy-duty trucks, locomotives, fishing vessels, tugboats, which are going to have some benefits right in the Channel Islands National Park also. And the other area that there can be quite a bit of work done with current technology is the large ocean-going cargo vessels. And once again, we'd be having air quality benefits onshore from that, but certainly you'd be getting benefits from particulate matter, less particulate matter coming from those ocean-going vessels right in the national park.
No, we certainly would appreciate that. And one thing that we're very aware of is that there's nothing which goes on the mainland which does not impact on the islands. That clearly the air quality, whether it's on the mainland or the islands, as you said earlier, that the air is all connected. And so that you're doing to regulate on shore definitely impacts the islands, and for that we thank you. Now, the monitoring, I know you have done some monitoring on the islands. Is there a difference on the air quality in the islands?
It's much cleaner in the islands. When you look at Ventura County, as I said, you really only see exceedances in the coastal valley, the inland valleys. Mm-hmm. The coastal plain is quite clean, and that's because we have a prevailing onshore breeze from the ocean, and when you really look out there, there's not a whole lot of emission sources. You've got the cargo vessels going by, you've got the oil and gas platforms. The oil and gas platforms are already regulated and have reduced their emissions to the extent feasible. And now when you see reductions coming from the ships, there will definitely be a benefit onshore and in the islands.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for your time, and we certainly appreciate the work that your agency does, and look forward to clean air in the future. Now let's take a look at the film.
Air, so precious and mysterious that searching among the billions of stars and planets in our galaxy, we know of only one sure place to find it. This invisible layer wrapped around Earth is the delicate canopy surrounding our planet, making life possible. In its pure form, we can't smell, taste, or even see it. And only as it passes as an afternoon breeze do we feel its presence. But is air really invisible? Is it possible that there might be a way to see it with something other than our senses?
Yes, I think so.
It's 1:42 a.m. Maria Rodriguez takes her first breath. But the air that fills her tiny lungs had its own birth almost 5 billion years ago. As the Earth was born, so was the air that surrounds her. Gases released from fiery beginnings swirled around the new planet. Over time, volcanoes and planetary eruptions spewed more gases, trapped by Earth's gravity. Microscopic bacteria began to grow on the Earth's surface. A balance was achieved between the Earth, the Sun, and the air. And so it was for billions of years until the rise of man. And in the blink of an eye, the air changed forever. Early man put his own mark on the invisible world around him. The legacy of our ancestors includes not only prehistoric drawings on cave walls, but soot-covered ceilings left over from burning fires. As poets and philosophers made great strides interpreting the world around them, air was left to the language of myth to explain its mysteries. Ancient Egyptians considered it a river between the heavens and earth. For the Greeks, who believed the world consisted of 4 elements, fire, earth, water, and air, air was primary because it could transform into fire and condense into water. Until the advent of modern chemistry, this view went largely unchallenged. In the 1500s, a physician's son, Philippus Theophrastus Bombastus, or Paracelsus, as he called himself, grew up watching his father treat sick miners, and he deduced that their illness came from the dirty air they were breathing in the mines. A radical view at the time. His views weren't exactly popular. It would be 2 more centuries before a major breakthrough changed our understanding of air. On the outside, Joseph Priestley was an upstanding man of the cloth.
Let us pray.
An English clergyman dedicated to his religious faith.
Hallowed be thy
But inside Priestley also beat the heart of a scientist. He would perform countless experiments in his spare time, even though he had no formal training in science. One of Priestley's experiments involved heating mercuric oxide. The result was the release of 2 different gases, which he called 2 kinds of air. He shared his experiments with a French tax collector and scientist, Antoine Lavoisier. It was Lavoisier who quickly realized that Priestley's 2 kinds of air were really 2 unique and distinct gases. Priestley and Lavoisier helped identify the principal components of air: nitrogen and oxygen. But the air also contained smaller amounts of other chemicals, an evolving recipe that would change radically during the Industrial Revolution. In the early 1900s in London, a new kind of air was described: smog. The word, a combination of smoke and fog, was coined by Dr. Harold DeVoe to describe the thick, pungent air hovering over the city on polluted days. For the next several decades, air would continue to be a silent force until smog screamed across the headlines. Donora is a one-stoplight town in the southwest corner of Pennsylvania. It's hard to imagine that this sleepy place was once a thriving steel mill town and home to 14,000 residents. During Halloween week in 1948, a blanket of air trapped the smoke and toxic fumes belching out from Donora's steel and zinc factories.
It was just a pure yellow fog that smelled like sulfur. and you couldn't see the streetlights. You couldn't see any cars. You could see nothing. Just this yellow fog.
It was an unusual phenomenon that persisted over several days, killing 20 people and leaving hundreds evacuated or hospitalized.
Well, one of my dear friends was a doctor, and she had charge of it. Jane said there wasn't anything to do. They just brought them in. I looked at them and said, they're dead. And that was it. They just kept them there till the funeral directors could take care of it. They had to just stay there. Poor souls.
A decade later, Donora's mortality rate remained higher than neighboring areas. Its long-term effects are still unknown. What happened in Donora was rare but not unique. In 1952, an air pollution disaster descended on London, England.
Christmas comes but once a year, but smog knows no calendar. In fact, like the unwanted guest, it always drops in when it's most inconvenient. The smog went creeping across the country, cutting down visibility, causing chaos in traffic, holding up Christmas mail, catching everybody by the throat in its cold, clammy fingers.
When he visited the city at the end of the 19th century, in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, the Impressionist painter Claude Monet was enchanted by the myriad of colors he saw in the London sky. But the shimmering colors in Monet's masterpieces are, in fact, light reflecting off pollutants suspended in the air and fog. London's heavy skies might have stirred the creativity of a painter, but it was the Great Fog of 1952 that made front-page headlines.
A Movietone cameraman drove through fog-shrouded London to report on the traffic chaos. The great smog invasion affecting 30 counties has caused a major dislocation of rail services, with late arrivals and uncertain departures, while the few trains that are running serve to underline one of the causes of air pollution.
It was Donora all over again, this time on a massive scale. Nearly 4,000 deaths were attributed to the killer fog.
It's a menace, this choking, eye-watering smog.
Could what happened in London happen in today's world? It's an easy question to answer because it's happening right now. Shanghai, China, is one of the world's most polluted cities, located near the geographic center of China. A place where residents wear surgical masks and the sky turns yellow for days at a time. The Industrial Revolution came late to China, but it arrived with a vengeance. And it is clearly no coincidence that respiratory illness is one of the leading causes of death. But the problem is not limited to one city in China. Satellite photos taken from space show us the Great Wall of China, but they also show us other things as well. Massive clouds of grayish matter, smog, drifting across all our continents, daily impacting the health of millions. While some of this smog is still created by the burning of coal for industrial purposes, more and more of it comes from our vehicles, the cars and trucks that burn fossil fuels. Ever since Professor Ari Hagensmith discovered the photochemical link between cars and air pollution, the total amount of smog worldwide has increased dramatically. So even in the areas where smog may not be visible, it is still there. A vanload of commuters hits the morning traffic in St. Louis, Missouri. The internal combustion engines emit smog-forming pollutants into the air. 3 days later, 700 miles away, hikers in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park breathe in polluted air from the van's fumes. A snowboarder on the slopes of Whistler Mountain in Canada. As he gasps for air, he breathes in pollution from one of China's industrial cities. Sound unbelievable? Maybe so. But scientists are only just beginning to discover how air currents are transporting pollutants from one corner of the globe to to another. And this journey takes only a matter of days. During this voyage, much of the world's air eventually passes by right here, at the South Pole, a vast expanse of ice. No cars, no industry, no cities, which makes it the ideal place to study air pollution.
One of the things we can do in the Antarctic, and in Greenland in fact, is to drill deep into the ice. Because as snow falls in through the atmosphere, it collects some information about the climate state and about pollution in the atmosphere, and it's then laid down on the surface as snowfall, and the snowfall builds up year after year, and it doesn't really melt in the polar regions, so the ice just builds up year after year and just into a big thick sequence, up to 2 miles thick, the ice in the Antarctic, and we can drill from the surface down deep into it, and as we drill down into the ice, we're effectively going further and further back in time.
Here, a team of atmospheric scientists drill through the thick layers of hard-packed snow at the South Pole.
I'm digging for old air. In fact, there's no other source of old air on the planet except locked in the ice.
Buried at Dome C, deep beneath the surface, are pockets of air frozen in time for over 1 million years. The scientists' goal? To retrieve and capture this trapped air in small canisters and send them back to a lab for analysis. It's just one way to get a glimpse of how dramatically our air has changed since the last ice age.
What I'm doing now is I'm taking a thin slice of the core in order to measure the chemistry of the ice. So what we're looking for here is the pollution in the atmosphere, the chemical pollution in the atmosphere rather than just the gases. So we can actually tell you the real atmosphere of 800,000 years ago. If I will take a piece of ice and pop it into some hot water for you, you'll be able to see these little tiny bubbles bursting and coming to the surface, and I'll be actually releasing an air that was last circulating around the atmosphere thousands of years ago.
Dr. Robert Mulvaney and his team have chronicled a steady and disturbing rise in global pollution. Of critical concern are the recorded levels of carbon dioxide trapped in the ice core samples.
One of the things we can see is the levels of carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere. Now these are what we call greenhouse gases. These are the things that are causing climate to change today. These are the things that you worry about, the carbon emissions from things like burning fossil fuels or using your car to drive to work or to school or whatever. They release these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere like carbon dioxide. And we know this causes the temperature of the atmosphere to start to warm. We call this global warming or climate change. Now if we look back over the past 800,000 years, we know what the natural levels of carbon dioxide and methane are, the natural levels of the greenhouse gases. And today we're very, very much higher than we've ever been for the whole of that 800,000 years.
This phenomenon has many scientists worried. Already the effects of global climate change are evident. Once prominent glaciers have receded dramatically. In Montana's Glacier National Park, there are 26 glaciers left, where only a century ago there were 150 glaciers nestled into the cliffs and peaks. In addition, several Antarctic ice shelves have collapsed, some disintegrating in the span of 5 days. As ice melts, sea levels will change. Scientists predict that over the next century, sea levels will rise in the range of 4 inches to 3 feet. Temperature variations will also cause increased damage from hurricanes, floods, fires, and infectious diseases. And the data collected by Mulvaney's team shows a convincing link between pollution in the air and the unprecedented climate changes our world is experiencing. But measuring carbon dioxide is only one of the indicators that show the air is changing. Air quality readings of other hazardous pollutants like ozone, sulfur dioxide, and particle pollution are taking worldwide at thousands of monitoring stations, like this one in Ventura County, California. The data in the United States is collected and forwarded to state and federal agencies, including the United States Environmental Protection Agency. This information enables them to determine which areas of the country do not meet government health standards for air quality. Today, more than 100 million Americans live in counties with unhealthful air. So how did we get here? How did this happen to an ecological system billions of years in the making? It's us, the way we live, our choices, our cars, our factories, our homes, the ships, trucks, planes, and trains that move us and our goods all over the world. 2 days after she took her first breath, Maria Rodriguez is ready to go home. At the hospital, every effort has been made to ensure the newborn's perfect health. But now that she is going home, she faces the first major assault on her body's ability to defend itself from outside attacks. At home, in her family's backyard in East Los Angeles, California, she will not only breathe in the air, which her body's cells need to function, but she will also begin breathing in an odd mixture of chemicals and poisons. 20,000 breaths a day. Just 200 yards from Maria's house is the intersection of two major freeways. Thousands of cars and trucks pass over these freeways each day, while trains pour into a nearby rail yard, all spewing diesel fumes only yards from her crib.
Today, more people die every year from air pollution than die from automobile accidents in the United States. And in fact, it's several times as many.
Air pollution and its effects on human health is a subject that Harvard's Dr. Joel Schwartz has made his life's work.
We're trying to do studies that show how we get from the particles in the air to the health effects, so that we can see particles get in your lungs and there's more inflammation in your lungs, and then we look at inflammation in the arteries. So we see particles in the air, more heart attacks. We're trying to get all the intermediate steps filled in, and we're trying to document that every step of the process really is happening in people, so there can't be any doubt.
In the Utah Valley, where over 250,000 people live, the effects of air pollution are crystal clear.
Well, there's a steel mill in Utah that's in a valley in the middle of the mountains in the Rockies. And of course, all those mountains trap the air pollution in the valley. But one year, the steel mill went on strike, and that winter, the air pollution concentrations were cut in half. The next year, the strike was settled, they went back up again. And when Arden Pope took a look at hospital admissions in the valley for pneumonia, for asthma, what he saw was the hospital admissions dropped dramatically the winter that the mill was closed, and went back up again when the steel mill started up again. So it was as simple as could be. You turn off the pollution and fewer people get sick.
Because of this shocking transformation of our air, a new partnership is forming. Scientists, governments, corporations, and citizens themselves are taking action and creating innovative solutions to the problem of air pollution. This is one of our planet's youngest countries, geologically speaking, Iceland. This might seem an unlikely place for an air quality revolution, but that's the best description for what's happening on this tiny island of 300,000 inhabitants whose biggest industry is fishing. Iceland aspires to become the first nation on Earth to completely eliminate the burning of fossil fuels. But how does an entire country completely replace its dependence on oil? The answer lies in a gas that formed the basis for the creation of our galaxy 15 billion years ago: hydrogen. When exposed to oxygen, hydrogen creates a combination of electricity and water, providing ample energy to run a car, truck, or even a space shuttle without creating any harmful emissions.
This adventure in Iceland is about displacing hydrocarbon out of our energy economy totally. We now have about 31% of our energy is imported hydrocarbons. In the post-World War II period, we displaced coal from heating Reykjavik by using geothermal. And in this new millennium we're now, we want to displace hydrocarbons from our economy by making our own domestically made hydrogen.
In Iceland, the hydrogen will be generated using geothermal energy that naturally exists there.
The Earth is cooling off. She has to get rid of the energy some way. And the heat energy is dissipated through the plate boundaries and through volcanoes. Those are the sweating mechanism of Mother Earth. And actually what we are doing here, we are sitting at the plate boundaries, so we are sitting in the sweating organ, one of the sweating organs, and tapping off the energy.
Which means that the production of hydrogen will not release any other harmful pollutants into the air. While fuel cell technology was originally developed for the U.S. space program in the 1960s, it has not become commonplace because hydrogen is difficult to produce and store in mass quantities in a safe, clean, and cost-effective manner.
We have been offering Iceland as a platform for testing the hydrogen economy. So Iceland is seen, and we have our government with us in this, is seen as an international platform for testing this technology.
Iceland is not alone in its pioneering spirit. Here at the EVS 23 show, there are nearly 100 different alternative fuel cars on display, from solar-powered to hydrogen fuel cell to natural gas and everything in between. They all share one thing in common: fewer harmful emissions. Even the hybrid vehicle, which uses a combination of gasoline power and electricity, cuts emissions dramatically.
You know, we have to find creative ways of tapping into useful energy. I mean, energy's everywhere, but in terms of useful energy, there's only a certain finite amount of it. But we could use renewable technology and using them in creative infrastructure ways that we could create fuel for our use and be able to sustain ourselves. The important thing here is being able to sustainably develop and be able to meet that level of energy demand with the growing population. That's going to be the greatest challenge as we get to the future here. Is that population growth, it's, you know, year after year, it's growing and growing, then that demand on energy is growing and growing as well. So we need to find a way that we could be able to provide that level of energy demand in a sustainable way, which has no harmful effect on the environment.
In fact, if every vehicle on U.S. roads today were a hybrid, we would reduce air pollution by more than half. But motor vehicles are only part of the challenge. In Europe and America, the energy used to light, heat, and power our buildings and homes uses about 40% of all energy consumed, adding even more pollution to our air from power plants. Here in South London, an 84-unit development is proving that clean air starts at home. It's called BedZ. The Z standing for Zero Emissions Energy. This is one of the most energy-efficient places to live in the industrialized world. Walls 19 inches thick keep temperatures comfortable year-round. Windows are triple glazed. A wind-driven ventilation system feeds outside air into each house.
All the time, these buildings are breathing. They're sucking in fresh air from the roof and they're extracting stale air. But what's clever is the outgoing stale air preheats the incoming fresh air without cross-contamination. So these are healthy buildings, but they're also very thermally efficient buildings. That recovers 70% of the heat in the winter and gives you nice clean air inside the rooms.
And whatever energy these homes still need after taking advantage of all these energy savers comes from a state-of-the-art on-site power plant. These simple innovations help shrink the amount of energy needed for daily living.
Virtually every part of BedZ has been designed to make it very easy to lead a low-carbon lifestyle, or that's the idea. So people haven't had to make a great effort. It's all just inherent in every single design decision. So for starters, you don't have to, if you don't want to, travel to work. You don't have to spend an hour and a half commuting to work. The workspace is integrated. There's enough desk space here for everybody who lives here to work here, if they want to, at some point in the future.
The residents of BZ aren't eco-zealots. They are simply people who are at the forefront of a global trend toward reducing energy consumption in the home.
We're consuming too many resources in the world, and at the moment we're consuming more resources than the Earth can sustain, about 25% more. And if you look at that, you can actually divide that up into a fair share if you divide the world population into this amount of land and leave a little bit for wildlife and wilderness. And that means that in Europe we're using 3 times as much as we ought to be using, which means that if everyone in the world lived like a European, we'd need 3 planets to support us. Whereas in the United States, even more resources are being consumed, unfortunately. I think because you have such a great lifestyle with the wide open spaces. And if everyone in the world lived like the average American, then we'd need 5 planets to support us. So we need to look at reducing our resource use. And I think what we've shown here at BZ is that you can actually reduce your resource use down to a 1 planet level without compromising on your quality of life.
In the United States, new green communities are being constructed, and individual homes are also being retrofitted, so that energy-efficient technologies become standard practice throughout the housing industry. But what if you don't live in an energy-efficient community like BZ, and you don't drive an alternative fuel vehicle? Are the rest of us powerless in helping to transform the air around us? Angelo Logan doesn't think so. Angelo is a mechanic by trade. He has lived in Maria's neighborhood all his life. A neighborhood that is home not only to 13,000 residents, but also home to the 710 freeway, considered the busiest freeway in the United States.
It's become a cross intersection of goods movement, with diesel trucks and diesel trains intersecting the community and spewing out black soot throughout the neighborhood.
Every day, over 47,000 trucks pour into this community, bringing cargo from the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach to a transportation hub where they will be shipped out to the rest of the country. In fact, over 50% of all the products imported from Asia come through Commerce, California. So wherever you live in the United States, you are likely to buy an item that has traveled on the 710 freeway.
I moved here in 1945. Behind my home were Japanese farms. Since then, trucks are within 10 feet of our home. Noise, lights, and total pollution because of the trains idling. Some nights they idle from night to morning. But the railroad's not going anyplace, and the homes are still there, and we've got sickness.
I just feel like I'm contaminated by a bunch of stuff, because that's just scary, having 47,000 trucks coming and just driving right past your house and by everyone else's house.
Physicians and scientists at the nearby Keck School for Medicine at the University of Southern California have been charting the health of all the communities that border the 710 freeway for over 20 years.
Over the last several years, there's been an increase of respiratory illnesses in children and elderly, asthma, bronchitis, and elevated level of cancers. A lot of my close friends, fathers, and parents have been diagnosed with terminal cancer.
But long before Angelo had this concrete evidence, he became an environmental advocate. His title, Project Director for the East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice, obscures Angelo's straightforward mission. Cleaner air for healthier lives for everyone, no matter where you live.
My feeling is we need children, young adults to know about the green and to get out in their community and fight for this pollution that's happening.
Yeah, I just like the pollution to stop instead of moving, because, this is a great place.
The East Yard Community Group has definitely had their voice heard throughout the region. Not only have they mobilized their own neighborhood, but have also joined forces with other organizations to make their concerns known throughout Southern California. Today, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, that once were considered to be major polluters in the area, are making international news as they bring new, innovative clean technologies and green initiatives to their daily business practices.
It's our air. We all breathe the same air. The port belongs to the people are engaged and belong to the port. And so, since it's our air and we all have to breathe it, it's important that we help clean it up.
I think it's a good example of when a community comes together, we can make a difference. We can improve the quality of life for the local community and improve the air quality for the whole region in general. And so it's only unique that we took action, several years ago, but I think that other communities are very similar to this and can also take action as well.
As his awareness has grown, he's become even more committed to making sure the health of every person in his community is being taken into account.
You don't need a degree to know that the pollution kills and that pollution is dangerous for children to breathe.
The more we learn about air, the more we discover. And, as it turns out, air really isn't invisible. It shows up in the visions of our great artists. It shows up in global health statistics. It shows up in new and cleaner technologies. And it shows up in the efforts of air quality visionaries, the residents of Bedzed in England, the island nation of Iceland, and countless others who continue to heal the air. But there are still profound questions for the future. What will our air be like 10 years from now? Or 100? Breathe in. The search begins with you.